this is going to be the largest financial decision that anyone is going to make in their lives.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the DevLab series. We are super excited to have you tuning in. Today, I am joined by Kelsey, who is a principal machine learning software engineer at Zillow. And Zillow is a product that many people recognize, but in this conversation, we're going to go behind the scenes and we're going to talk about Kelsey's journey into tech, what it's like building AI that supports real people making major life decisions, and how teams at Zillow think about scaling AI in a really thoughtful way. We'll also touch on remote collaboration, ways of working, and what matters most for engineers who are thinking about what the next step in their careers looks like for them. Kelsey, it is so great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Alex. I'm really excited to be here. And
Amazing. We're so excited to have you. And to kick us off with, I would love for you to walk us through just kind of how you got into tech and then also what eventually pulled you more towards the machine learning side of things.
yep. So I studied electrical engineering actually at Queen's University. I'm originally Canadian, so you might hear that in my accent. So during my studies, actually the first time I really found I got into software and actually machine learning was doing an internship with a company called Hydro One. I was building predictive maintenance software there for the electrical grid. And that was kind of that first moment where I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. This makes the day go by quite quickly. So I knew by the time I graduated that I was really more drawn to the software side than, working in a pure electrical field. And so after I graduated, I moved down to the United States and I started my job at Microsoft. There, I was working on Microsoft Edge, the browser, and I had a pretty interesting experience there. I would say really early in my career, I worked on really a wide breadth of different areas of software. So I really worked across the stack and gained a little bit of experience in, data engineering, front end engineering, back end engineering. And then ultimately, I ended up, because of the time I was working there, we were going through this major transformation where we were switching our entire browser to be built on top of Chromium. And so that presents an opportunity to build new teams and new areas. And we built this new team that was focused on improving AI productivity in browser through, utilizing machine learning. Ultimately, that's the team I ended up working on. And I spent throughout the 5 years at Microsoft, I spent a few years, kind of focused on building infrastructure to train and serve machine learning models, and then also building out the machine learning runtime within the browser. And so by that point, I'd be working more deeper in the machine learning field, and I knew that that was what I liked. And so then after 5 years, I moved to Zillow, and I was working in, again, a really machine learning specific role. So I started working within the search and discovery space, so building out the real-time recommendation systems on Zillow. So if you're on Zillow, anywhere you see the homepage, any sort of recommendations, that was the work that me and my team built.
So
And then yeah, in the last year, with the agentic AI craze, we built a new organization to focus specifically on agentic AI. And so that's the space I've been working on in the last year, and we're going to chat a lot more about today.
yeah, amazing. It's really interesting to hear about your background and what got you here. I think with machine learning and AI, especially, there are so many different backgrounds that can drive you into this space. And I think that as it is such an up and coming kind of focus in your career, everyone's path looks a little bit different. I am super excited to get more into the Zillow side of things right now. And I guess on that topic, it would be really cool to hear just kind of a bit more on what your role looks like in practice and where you spend most of your time on a daily basis.
Yeah, certainly. So, as a principal machine learning engineer, I spend the majority of my time thinking about how we can build systems and design systems that really can span across our organization within the AI space. So, thinking about how Zillow has so many different domains. We have, people shopping, we have people getting mortgages, we have people who are, doing all kinds of things on Zillow. So thinking about how we build a product that can span across all those different domains and really build that ecosystem within Zillow. And what that looks like more on a practical perspective, a day-to-day or week-to-week basis is something like I try to preserve like some of my time for kind of focused time. So this might look like writing code, doing research, reading papers or blogs, and just like really kind of like thinking about the problems we're trying to solve. And then I spend a large portion of my time collaborating. And so we have very cross-functional teams at Zillow. So our designers, our product, engineering, science, we're all sitting together and really from the beginning focusing on that product that we're going to build. So a lot of that looks like a meaningful amount of time spent in design, getting alignment, clarifying requirements, trade-offs, working through all those things and to really make sure that the things we're building are going to be durable and they're going to serve us for, 6 months down the line, years down the line.
That's awesome. I think it feels so rare to hear about someone's role being such a true combination of being in the weeds yourself, but also getting to work so collaboratively across the board, and then also still managing to have some time carved out in your day for learning and development. I think, yeah, it's very cool to see just the balance and the variety that you have in your day. And I think that you and the Zillow team sound to have such a really cool kind of level of collaboration and human interaction throughout your day. And I think that that's something that sounds really special and something that I'm excited to hear more about as well.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely makes it enjoyable way to spend your day.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of on that topic and a little bit more into how Zillow impacts people's day-to-day lives. Obviously, Zillow sits right in the middle of a lot of people's major life decisions. So I would love to hear a bit more on how that responsibility shapes how you and your team think about building and shipping AI and kind of what some of those conversations look like.
Yeah, it's definitely a big question, and it's really at the heart of the work we do here, right? We're with Zillow, like we're talking about people's moves. We're usually intersecting people at really major moments in their life. So for me, when I think about like my housing journey, right? The times when I was moving to the United States. I was moving to a new city. The next move, I was moving in with my partner. We were buying that first home together, right? So you're intersecting people in this like incredibly exciting period of their lives, but also a period that can be like naturally very stressful and a lot of change. And especially when it comes to home buying, certainly this is going to be the largest financial decision that anyone is going to make in their lives, right? So when you think about it that way, we really want to approach this problem to build trust with their users and also try to provide that clarity and transparency and help them gain that confidence to make that decision. We know it's an incredible stressful process. Like we actually have this stat that we refer to that over half of home buyers will cry at one point during the home buying journey, which
Not
I think
surprised by
like
that.
everyone can relate to, right?
Yeah.
So I think like this helps us define success. Are we not just building systems that quote work? Are we building systems that can meaningfully help people guide people through this, long and complex process? And I think another thing that I'm really, really proud of is Zillow's work on ethical AI. So we work in a highly regulated industry, but also like Zillow's really a leader in building ethical AI. So making sure that all the AI products we're building are fair housing compliant. And we've actually built a fair housing classifier and data set and have open sourced that work. So really contributing back to the community there as well. And I think the last thing is just thinking about how, real people are influencing the design. Like pretty much everyone at Zillow who works here has moved. A lot of people have bought houses. You can really personally relate to that experience. And so we try to bring that back into the products we're building and, testing with real users, asking real users about their needs and things like that to make sure we're building really, really good product.
Yeah, I love that. And I think exactly what you said about being involved in buying a home yourself, I think it's such a cool perspective to have gone through the process and really understand like what could have been better about this, what would have made me feel more confident or more trusting in the information that I was relying on. So I think being able to have that perspective and carry it over into your work is so invaluable. And it's also incredible to hear about what Zillow is doing just beyond simply helping people find the right space for them, also being able to give back to the community and have an impact that's even greater beyond. Um, kind of the core value of Zillow. So that's really exciting to hear about. And when it comes to Zillow using AI as a company, it's amazing to hear how long Zillow has been using AI for, like well before the current wave of generative tools that we're in right now. And I would love to hear more on how you see that history influencing how the company is approaching AI today and what that kind of timeline and transition has looked like.
Yeah, so I mean, the classic example everyone thinks about is this estimate, right? Everyone knows about this estimate. It's actually been around since 2006, right? So if this estimate is like Zillow's child, it's an adult, right? Like we're not new to machine learning and AI here. So I think that really helps in a few ways. The first is as an engineer, we have really established platforms, systems, expertise. We're not trying to do this all for the first time with this new wave of AI. We've built non-deterministic systems in the past. We have great experience in the company around, things like evaluation and like fair housing, those types of things. So I think from that perspective, we're building on, a really solid foundation. Even though this technology is very new, we kind of have that foundation to ground ourselves in. I think the other part comes from how we think about designing our products, and I kind of mentioned how that cross-functional team is sitting together like quite early in the development process. And I think one of the things that like I've seen even at Zillow or at other companies is AI is kind of this afterthought. You have this well-established product and it's working really well, and then you come in after and you think, how can I use machine learning or AI to make this better? But at Zillow, I would say we try to think about that much earlier in the product. So as we're thinking about developing products, we're already thinking about how could we utilize AI or machine learning, and is this the right problem for it? Like, it's certainly not always the right solution to a problem. Sometimes, it's not, and we don't go down that route. But we're thinking about that early in that design. And I think that really shapes the product we're building with the AI really, built in there. And then I think like the other like thing is things are moving so fast, and Zillow's really staying up to date and adopting these technologies. So a really great example of this was the Zillow app in ChatGPT. This was a project I actually worked on. It was a bit chaotic. We first met with OpenAI 6 weeks actually prior to launching. We met with them and we talked about, hey, they said like, this is what we want to do. We want to have this Zillow app built right into ChatGPT so that when users are searching for homes or asking questions about their affordability, Zillow can be embedded right there within ChatGPT. And so we really worked with them through that process of, designing what this would look like, the technical problems we had to solve, how are we going to support this. And actually that technical work even evolved into the MCP apps standard. So Zillow's like really, I think, respected as a leader in the area and really actually even shaping the industry as well.
That's so cool. That sounds like just such a career defining moment for you, like something that you'll probably be able to look back on 20 years in the future and think about how amazing it is to have been involved in something like that. And I think what you said at the beginning about AI really being embedded in the way that Zillow has always done things is really interesting to hear about, because that's not the case for everyone. And having that foundation, I kind of gathering it seems like it's opened a lot of the doors that now Zillow is getting to dive into with some of the current initiatives and what you all are working on. So that's really cool to hear about. And then this kind of builds on what we were talking about right then, but you are working on agentic AI systems that need to be involving a lot of different teams and domains. What have been some of the biggest challenges in designing those systems so that they scale well, stay maintainable, and continue earning the trust of the Zillow community?
Yeah, this has been like a really challenging and really interesting problem to work on. So I think when we look at like generative AI systems, they're really different than traditional software systems. So for the majority of the time at Zillow, we had these traditional software systems and we had these really strict interfaces that would exist between different teams and different domains. So like For example, if you're on the search page and you're searching for homes, primarily that's the search domain. And, there's this boundary that exists. And, you maybe would work with another team to define an API contract or define kind of that handoff. But really, we were able to kind of create domains and they were fairly isolated from each other. And so that allowed teams to move kind of fast on their own and just like work on those interfaces when it was necessary. The challenge that we have with generative AI systems is we're trying to build one Zillow Copilot that can really assist the users all the way from, just dreaming all the way to keys in hand, right? So this is an incredibly long journey, and it's a journey that spans like the whole company of Zillow. So we need expertise from a wide variety of domains. And so we have a really small team of generative AI org folks, and that we know that there's no way that we can, become an expert in each domain to build the AI for that portion of the domain. So really we've had to think about how to build a federated model. So within the agentic AI team, we are building the infrastructure for the core agent, and then thinking about, okay, how is that the pattern that other teams should use to integrate into the main Copilot agent. So thinking about things like sub-agent, or like really popular right now is like anthropic skills. And so evaluating those different patterns and thinking about what that looks like. And then the other thing that's really important is evaluations. So traditional software, we originally actually had these like people who were called test engineers, and these people's job was to write unit tests, write integration tests, maybe do some manual testing. And eventually, like, what happened is we realized that the people who are writing the software should just have those skills. Like, if you're writing software, you should understand how to test that software. And of course, that made a ton of sense, and pretty much the whole industry moved to that model. And I think what we're seeing now with generative AI is really something similar, where now we have to figure out how to test these non-deterministic systems. So trying it once and saying it worked, like, we don't know that it'll work 10 out of 10 times. It might work 9 out of 10 times. And we want to be able to quantify that within our evaluations. And like, even if you make one change somewhere in one part of the system, you put it all into this kind of black box that is generative AI, and you can be affecting something like totally somewhere else. So we really need that robust evaluation system to be able to ship confidently. So a lot of that has looked like really just upskilling people who aren't machine learning engineers, people who aren't applied scientists. So we have, we're teaching product managers, we're teaching software engineers how to write evaluations for their domain and how to really encode that domain specific knowledge that they have into our core agent.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's such a new world, and as someone who has been a longtime Zillow fan but hasn't actually bought a home yet, having an end-to-end co-pilot sounds so appealing for the time that that will come for me. So very cool to hear the thought behind that and how it's in the works, and also just the way that everyone has collaborated and the different teams and what roles have looked like and how things have evolved as you've kind of built that out. And then I think that that leads really well into the next question of how has the rise of AI tools changed the way that you all build and experiment and collaborate on a daily basis?
Yeah, this has been a wild year in AI, and I think it's probably nobody saw this amount of change, a few years ago with the AI tools. And so Zillow's really always been kind of like an early adopter of these tools. So we were trying out pilots of these coding tools, Windsurf, things like that, probably like 2, maybe 3 years ago, when, to be quite honest, they were really not good. Like, they did not work. But I think we've really, I think with the thing with AI is you need to keep trying, because something that doesn't work today is going to work really well probably in a month, 3 months, a year, right? So we've certainly seen that with coding tools. We have people at the company using, their coding tool of choice, Cursor, Claude, Codex, you name it. We also have been, using, tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Replit. So really, these tools are interesting because they've helped us, I think, move very fast early. So it's like previously a process of, doing user research on a design, we had to think a lot more and be more confident earlier before we built something to go put in front of a user. But now with a lot of these generative AI tools, you can build something actually quite quickly. So to test that idea, that development cost used to be like the most timely thing in the process. And so early in the process, when you are less confident, you can kind of use that to speed up your workflow. It certainly creates, problems. Like we are using these coding tools, but we're still shipping code to millions of users in production, right? So it can't all be purely vibe coding. Let the AI do it. Don't
Yeah.
look at it, ship it. So the quality bar is still there. We still need, rigorous testing, evaluation, reviewing code, like reviewing. Now you have a lot more code to review. And so thinking about, how to manage that problem. We have new problems to solve now, but I think like it's really has helped accelerate us in some areas. And I think for me personally, like the thing I just try to think is even on like a weekly basis, like what did I do this week that I did manually, or what did I do that was taking my time, and is there a way I could do this with AI to be more productive? So that's something like a question I personally constantly find myself asking. And usually there's an answer or there's somebody else at Zillow who's like found a really creative way of doing something. And there's a really good community of sharing all those AI productivity gains.
Yeah, that's such a good call out is having that time to reflect on how could have I done this better and also being able to lean on your team then and ask what others are doing in those instances and have it be a truly collaborative space both in the AI that you're using and also in the AI that you're building. So it sounds like there's a good full circle process happening and it is such a learning period for everyone who's using AI in their workflow. So I think that'll resonate with a lot of people and everyone can ask themselves, how can I intentionally use AI to make myself more productive this week? How can I experiment with it? So I think that's a really interesting perspective. And the topic of AI, you have been able to give such interesting and firsthand insight into. And I think everyone is also really curious about Zillow as a company as a whole. I think a lot of people know that Zillow's a largely remote company, but from your answers is obviously still super invested in human connection and having that in-person element of things to be able to knowledge share. It would be really cool to hear what you've learned about when it comes to building trust and collaboration and still having that exciting level of momentum even across distributed teams.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Zillow is a fully remote company. We talk about, quote, cloud HQ, so we don't have a physical headquarters. We headquarter ourselves in the cloud. We do still have physical offices, so we have offices in like Seattle, San Francisco, a few other locations. And so if you are a person who likes going into the office, just have that separation and you live in one of those areas, that is still open to you. But for the most part, we are fully remote day to day. So we're working on Zoom, we're working on Slack, collaborating across Google Documents, things like that. We do really intentionally make time to gather together in the office. And so usually like maybe 3 or 4 times a year, we'll gather your org or your team in the office for kind of more that in-person brainstorming, collaboration, learning from each other, and then of course just social time is always still important. We actually have one. We still do an in-person hack week, so we actually gather the whole company in Seattle, so that's always a lot of fun as well. I think for me, like I switched to Zillow in 2021, so this was like right in the heart of the pandemic, and I had been working remote out of, everyone was working remote at that point, right? At Microsoft for a year. And so when I switched to Zillow, Zillow had already made the decision to continue being fully remote after the pandemic. And I think what I saw at Zillow or what I see at Zillow is more intentional, like intentionality into the way we do remote works. There's practices around things like core hours. So we try to have all of our meetings between 10 and 2 Pacific. So because we're working cross time zone, that falls within like a quote normal working hours for everyone. And things like having better documentation practices, better practices around like async review, and really just a lot of flexibility. So apart from those core hours, there's a fair amount of flexibility in when you do your work to work best with your with your life. So really like focusing on work-life balance for me, like I used to commute probably an hour and a half to 2 hours a day to Redmond when I worked in Seattle. So, like anyone in Seattle knows about the traffic. I used to ride my bike a lot, but I would try to play this game where I would try to beat the bus on my bike. Like that's kind of how slow, and I didn't have an e-bike, so that's like how slow we're talking about. So yeah, I certainly don't miss sitting in traffic. I love having that extra time and just the flexibility back in my life, and it just makes it, really, really sustainable way of working for me.
Yeah. The balance there sounds like the dream. I think that that's a description of what most people are looking in their working environment for, being able to have, one, the core hours that you know you're going to be able to collaborate with, but then also quiet hours that you know you're going to be able to be super productive in, and then also being able to have still the level of human connection and meeting multiple times a year in person, going into the office. If you are in a location that has an office, it sounds like it truly is the definition of a flexible and intentional working environment, which is really, I think, exciting for a lot of people when they're thinking about what their next opportunity looks like or what their ideal working setup looks like.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, cool. And then in the sense of looking ahead, you've alluded to it a little bit, but what excites you the most about where Zillow is headed next? I think especially when it comes to making buying, renting, and selling all more transparent, and kind of how your team is playing into that.
Yeah, I think the thing that really excites me is the scale of the problem. So we talked already a lot about the problem and just being able to really meaningfully make that much of a difference in a lot of people's lives. I think from a technical perspective, it's a really exciting problem to work on because you're working on a problem that is really, really long horizon. So if you're working in AI at other companies, a lot of your products you're building are fairly like transactional. So you might be trying to make a buying decision, but not buying a house, right? So it's probably going to last like a few days, maybe a week, right? Whereas when we talk about the housing journey, this is a journey that for most people lasts months or even years. So thinking from a technical perspective about building a co-pilot that can really assist somebody through that whole journey, I think is really unique to Zillow and really like a really challenging and exciting problem to work on. I also think Zillow has like such a wealth of data. We have, like years and years of data about people buying homes, about the market. And we just really have with AI the power of using this data to create transparency for people. So helping people get answers to those questions that we can support then with our unique data that we have available to us at Zillow. And I think, yeah, I think just right now, if you're working in AI, like we're working in a company that is already internet scale, we already have a lot of traffic. And so the opportunity ahead of us is to build, this really complex, like multi-domain system that can really meaningfully guide users through the home buying journey or renting.
So exciting. And it really sounds like you're just getting started. Zillow has already accomplished so much in the space, but it sounds like there's a whole world of exciting ideas ahead and a lot of things that are going to come to life in the next few months and the next few years. So I'm super excited to stay tuned and see it all get rolled out. And I think at this point, probably a lot of people listening are at least somewhat thinking about what their next move looks like. What kind of mindset or skills matter the most for the kind of work that you're doing as a low right now?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe the most important one is having a growth mindset. This is something we talk a lot about at Zillow. And I think, being open to trying new things, learning new areas. In the age of AI, I feel like this is even more important because AI is just changing the way we work so quickly that I think having that growth mindset is really, really important. And then, yeah, we're looking for builders, we're looking for critical thinkers, we're looking for people who are really passionate about solving these problems that we've talked about today, and really like thinking about how they can make a meaningful impact in the lives of millions of Americans. I think the other thing I would say is comfort with ambiguity. We're working in an area that's really new. We don't know how to solve all the problems that we're having, and sometimes we don't even really know how to identify what the problem is. So being comfort being comfortable working in that type of ambiguity and trying to create transparency in those scenarios is really important. And then finally, I think communication. This is really, really important in remote work, but I think it's important in all work and even working with AI, right? Like a large portion of how effectively you're working with AI is around how effectively you can communicate. And so we have a really heavily cross-functional teams at Zillow we've talked about, right? So communication becomes really, really important to maintain that communication across teams.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Kelsey, it has been such a pleasure to chat with you today. I've learned so much. It has made Zillow sound more and more like an exciting company that is one to watch and one that would be so cool to be a part of. Such a pleasure to get to hear about your journey and the impact that you're having on Zillow and the way that the team is continuing to grow and learn new things and the opportunities that that holds for people who might be interested in checking Zillow out. So thank you so much. And it was so great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. This was a great chat. And for anyone who has found this exciting and this sounds like the type of work that you're interested in working on, you can explore positions that we have available at zillow.com/careers or just Google Zillow careers and you'll find our openings. Thanks so much,
Amazing.
Alex.
Thanks, everyone.